Hi everyone, it's Liz over here with Premier Yarns. I want to say thank you to Michaels for sponsoring this class, and thank you to everyone for joining me today to do this really fun weave. If you want to say hi in the chat and let me know where you're watching from, I'll try to say hi back. So I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's a snowy day today. It's the second snow of the year so far, so it's been kind of fun. North Carolina, hi Carol. So we can, before I switch to my hand view so we can jump right into this, I'll show you our little project that we made. This is a Christmas tree weave. This is what the front looks like. This is what the back looks like. Not too bad, but I'll show you how to clean up the back as well. And I have placed in the chat a graph so you can make the large one. We don't have time because we only have an hour today to make the large one. So I just made a little small sample. So we're gonna make the small sample. And that graph is in the chat as well. So if you want to print them out, you can, go step by step, right? Row by row. The thing about this type of weaving is though, you can also just sort of free-hand it. It's not like, I usually teach crochet classes. It's not like knitting or crochet where you have to be very, like you have to follow the stitch pattern exactly, or it's going to be crazy. You can kind of just like have more fun with this and maybe make a few more rows or a few less rows. It's going to still be sort of the same type of project. For this one, we made an actual, like an image. So, you want to keep it to an image, but there's lots of weaves that just have like chunks of color and texture everywhere, and that would be something where you would just kind of sit down and start putting it together, which is really fun too. So I have a lot of people here today, which is really awesome. But if anyone has a question, please put it in the chat and I will try to answer it as we go. And if I miss you in the chat, if I don't see it, just like Jimena will interrupt me. So we'll try to get everybody's questions answered. If you think I totally forgot or I missed it totally, just pop it in there again, okay? So let's switch over to my hand so I can show you a little bit more of a close-up of what we've got going here. Here is our finished product. This particular tapestry I made on the larger loom. This is what my loom looks like. I can move up so you can see the whole thing. So this is probably like a medium-sized one. This is the one that you can purchase at Michaels. It's adjustable, so you can move these, move this bottom part into one of these other slots, so you can make it a smaller loom. And as far as the width goes, if you want a smaller tapestry like this width, you would just warp. These are the warp strings. You would only warp a little bit and then you just leave this space open. So you can really make a variety of sizes with this larger one. This is the one that I made the Christmas tree one with, so you can see it fits perfectly. For the class, I'm going to use my smaller one because we're going to make a smaller piece. So I have this littler one. If you want to make little things, it's just a little more easy to handle. So I'm going to first show you step by step everything that we need to do. I feel like you're okay. So Mary says you're not seeing the pattern. If you scroll all the way up, because I did it before we started, you should see the 2 PDF links and you just click on that and you can print it out. This is the larger one. This is the smaller one. So how to read this, if you're totally new to this, I'm going to go step by step. First, we put on the warp strings, okay? Those will go across here, and I'll show you how to put those on. The warp are the strings that are vertical, and then the weft is the yarn that we're going to put in between the warp strings. That is horizontal. So if you can see in the chart, these horizontal rows here, each block is going to be an over or an under. And you'll see when we start weaving it. So the black is over, The white is under, over, under, over, under. And then on the next row, you're going to do the opposite. So over, under, like that. And that's it. That's all it is. It's just over, under, over, under. It's called tabby weave. There's a lot of different ways to weave, but for this, we just do tabby weave to make like images. So let's put our warp strings on here so you can start to see how we're going to work through the chart. No pattern in the chat. Okay, I'll add it again. Jimena, can you see if some people are saying they can't find the graph? I mean, I can see it.
You know what, Liz? It might be because people who are not on a computer, they might not be able to see the PDFs. So let me work on that and put it on a drive, and I'll put the link in there in just a moment.
Awesome. Okay, you guys heard that. She's going to work on getting that. But like I said, we probably won't be able to get through the whole thing anyway, so you're going to mostly do it at home. This is just to show you kind of the steps. So we're just going to put, we start from the top and then we're going to go to the right. Okay. So first I'm going to put my, oh yeah, sorry. I almost forgot to tell you, for the warp, we use a cotton yarn. So always use cotton because it's stronger and it's going to help keep everything together. You don't want to use something that's real stretchy. It's going to stretch your warp out. If you can see, this was one thing I wanted to show you too. So you can see I warped this loom here. See where the strings are. This is where you want to use a nice strong cotton. But if I place my piece on there, you can see that it sort of pulls in slightly. I beat it down pretty good, so it doesn't really even pull in that much. But it will shrink just a teeny tiny bit. Okay. So when you put your strings on, you want to make sure they're pretty, see, if you can strum it like that, that's a good warp. Not too tight, not too loose. So we're going to start our warp at the top. Just put a knot on there, right? So just put it into that notch. And then I just tie a knot right on there. And it's probably not going to go anywhere. So just keep it in there, right? And then make a little knot on the bottom. And you only have to knot it for the first one. So I'm in the 1, 2, 3, 4th notch up here. And then when I go down, I want to make sure, obviously, that I go to the same notch so it's nice and straight. So 1, 2, 3, and here I'm in the 4th. Okay. So I'm going to go to the bottom. And then just wrap it around. Really simple. It's pretty much tells you how to do it. And into the next one. And then wrap that around the top and down to the bottom. And we're just going around. You don't have to cut more strings or anything. You just use one string and go from top to bottom. And as you can see, I'm holding it pretty snug. Where do you determine where to start? And do you have a certain number? Yeah, so in the charts that I made, each block is going to be 1 warp string. So you can just count the blocks. For this smaller one, I think I have 20. So I'm going to do 20. And you only have to start to make sure you have enough strings, right? So if I only had 10 strings, it doesn't really matter where I start because I'm still going to have leftover on either side. But for here, I have 20. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12. I just eyeball it and know I'm going to have enough for 20. So if you're doing something that's like pre-planned, you made a chart, you made an image, that kind of thing, then you would just count your strings, count your notches and say, okay, I want to start here if I need however many strings. But if you only need a few, you can just start somewhere here and then work through the center, because it's just easier to work in the center than it is on the sides. But if you want to fill it up all the way, that's fine too. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, here 17, 18, 19, and then at number 20 is where I'm going to end in the top where I started. So if I started in the top, I want to end in the top. That's not like a rule, it just kind of makes things easier. If you have an odd number, you're going to have to stop at the bottom, of course, but I like to start and stop at the top. Okay, and then I'll just take this and make another knot without loosening it too much. Just tie it on there however you can. These strings on the edges are not going to be seen, so it doesn't have to be perfect. This is the hard part, is getting it to be nice and tight at the edge here. So I have to like hold it with my other hand to make sure I don't loosen this one, because you don't want to loosen these strings. Okay, there we go. So let's see if I can, or if you want, you can wrap it around the next one and then maybe make a knot here, because this last knot is kind of a pain. So I'm just going to wrap it around a bunch so it doesn't come out. But really, you want to get a knot on both sides. Okay, so now that it's tight there, I can probably wrap it around this one and make a little knot. That'll work for now. Try to get it as neat as you can, but it's okay that we didn't get it super neat. So we can have this be our bottom, because we're going to cover all this bottom up with our fringe. So once you have it warped like this, remember you got to use your cotton, then you can start using your regular yarn. And at this point for the weft, you can use really any yarn. Let me just check the chat really. Okay. Okay, good. Looks like we're getting the attachment to work. Okay, so for the warp, cotton, smooth cotton. For the weft, you can use anything you want. You can use acrylic, you can use like macrame rope, you can use thick wool roving. The sky's the limit for the weft. It's just for the warp, because that's what's holding everything together, that we want to use a sturdy cotton that doesn't stretch too much. The first thing we want to do, because it could like sort of slip, is make like a little, we call it a twining row at the bottom, and that will keep everything from slipping. So let's use this gray. This is my Charisma. This is just a nice, I think this is a bulky acrylic yarn. So this Charisma works very well for these weaves. If you use a yarn that's really, really thin, you're going to have to make a lot of rows. So if I were to use another cotton to make my weft, they would be really tiny, and you would have to make a lot of rows to make an image. So first I'm just going to sort of put it in half like this, right? And then I'm going to take the bottom piece and put it under and just wrap it around. I'm working from left to right. So just wrap it under. So you have one piece under the first warp string and the other end over the first warp string. And then I'm going to take the bottom and put it, here's the top one. I'm going to put the bottom over the top and through under the next string, right? So like that. Now this one's on top. And don't pull it too tight. That's what's going to make your warp draw in. Okay, so keep it nice and loose. Now this is the bottom one. I'm going to take the bottom one and go over the top one and under the next warp string. And now this one's at the bottom, over the top and under the next warp string. Now this one's at the bottom. And I'm just going to do that all the way across. Under, and this I just do with my fingers. We don't need our needle yet. You always want to make a twining row with any weave that you make, because this thing is uneven, so it's making a lot of noise. Okay. Over. Now this one's at the top. I'll take my bottom one, go over and under the next warp string, right? So I'm going over the weft and then under the next warp string. Or like in front of the weft. And see how it's like not straight? That's totally fine. It doesn't have to be straight right away. Okay, and then until I get all the way to the end. And now at the very end, I have one tail under the weft and one tail over the weft, and I can just make a nice loose knot here to keep that in place. And then we're gonna tuck all of that underneath when we're finished. I'll leave a bit of a tail so we can tuck it, but not too much that it gets in your way. Okay, now the other, this is the other tool that I use. It's a comb. If you don't have a comb, you can use a hairbrush too. This is just like a regular comb. So this, with the comb, you can move everything into place. And if you don't have a comb, you can also use your needle. So this is kind of like the twining row that's going to keep everything into place. So I want to make sure it's nice and straight. And I'm just eyeballing it, because you can move it later. Okay. I got a graphs on. Okay, good. So everybody got the graphs. So now we're going to start our tabby weave, and that's our over under. And the tabby weave is what's going to create the image that we make. So when you're doing shapes, this outside border, I'm just going to make in this white, I guess. I can use the white or I could use the gray, whichever one you want to use. In the actual one, I use the cream. And I also use the cream cotton for the warp. So it kind of doesn't really show through too much. So if I were to use like a black warp, you would see those warp strings through, but sometimes that looks pretty. So it just all depends on what you want it to look like. This part is going to be where I use the white. And then this is like the bottom of the tree. And then this is where I'm going to make the green. And I only did black and white because usually for these, everything's black and white, but sometimes it can be hard for your eye to see like where you're supposed to do certain things. So just know that the colors are the overs and the whites are the unders. And then you can use whatever color you want. For the outside, same thing. We're going over under, but I didn't want to make whites and blues because then it would be hard to see the image. So we can do the shape and then we can work the border around the shape as we go, right? So you don't have to do like the shape first and then the border, but you can do it that way. If you have just like a small easy shape, you can just make the shape first in the center and then make like another border around it. So I'm going to start by cutting like a decently long piece. You don't want it to be too long because then it's going to take like forever for you to get it through, okay? And I've got my needle here. And I'm just going to put my yarn into the end of it. You can also tie it because it tends to fall off the needle sometimes. Now you can tie this to the first warp string, or you can just start going over and under and then tie it at the end. So I'm just going to start because this is just going to be a plain row. Oh wait, before we do that, I want to put a row of fringe. So let's put a little bit of fringe on here with the light green. I'm not going to do the whole row because it takes a long time, but I'm just going to show you how to do it. So let's say pieces. I'm just eyeballing this. That looks about right. So that's like what, like 5 inches or something. Make a few strands of that. And let's see here. I'm going to go in and around with these. Actually, I want it a little bit longer. And if you want all your fringe to look more even, then do the same amount of strings. So I'm going to hold about 4 strings together, right? And then I'm going to grab 2 of these. So we're going to do this above our twining because the twining is what holds it all together. I'm going to grab 2 of these. You can start with these 2 or these 2, whatever. And I'm going to go put one side there, like on the right of it, and the other side on the left of it, right? So it's just laying over those 2 warp strings. And then I'm going to pull the ends of this one through the center. So see how it's going around and under through the center. And then I'll just pull the ends of this one through the center as well. So this one's going to the left through the center, and the other one was going from the right to the center, through the center. And this one fell out, but that's okay. And then that just holds that on there. And then you trim it at the end when it's all done. Let me show you one more with just one so you can see a little better. If you make like a group of them, it looks pretty, but you could just do one. So we need 2 strings, right? We're going to sort of lay it on top. And then the right side is going to go under and through the center. And then the left side is going to do the same thing. It's going to go under and through the center. So see, kind of loops around like that. And that's it. That's called a raya fringe or raya knot. So you can make a whole row of those across, right? And that is going to be this little fringe that I made here. That's all I did for those, okay? So that's going to be your border. So you do that first after your twining. So twining, then your fringe, and then you can get into the tabby weave. So this is called tabby weave or plain weave. I just put a length of yarn onto my needle. And I'm just gonna start over under. I don't know according to the graph yet whether I'm gonna start over or under. I'm just gonna start just so I can get it going. But so let's start under the first one and then over the next one. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And then just pull that through. All the way till you get to the tail. See what I mean about using a really long piece to start? You have to pull a lot through. So there's a little bit of a tail that I'm going to leave so I can weave that in. And now here I was under this one, right? Let me get a little closer so you can see. And I'm going to go over this one, under, and I'm going to end with over. Okay, so now it's all like, you know, not straight, but that's okay. So you want to kind of pull it up like this and then pull it down like that so it looks like a little hill. And then you just take your finger and go like that. And then take it down with the comb. And that's going to keep it from, see how it's a little too loose? I'm just going to take it so it's a little bit more snug, but I don't want it too snug because it's going to pull. So I can give it a strum and then beat it down a little bit with the comb. This is probably the most important thing when you're doing this kind of weaving, is that if you pull everything too tight, it's going to make like an hourglass. It's going to pull in the center and be loose on the end. So you want to make sure that with every row that you do like a strum, and then you just kind of like give it some air, like let the air go through it and then comb it down. Okay, so now I'm over this string, right? So to come back the other way, we're going to go under this string. And now, as you can see, I'm doing the opposite of what I did here. So I'm under this one, I'm over this next one, under, over. To do the true tabby weave, you have to alternate under, over with every row. And sometimes you'll be going along and it'll be like, oh, I messed up and I didn't do the over under. So just kind of pay attention, make sure you're doing the opposite of what you did the previous row. Because it'll just look off in that one spot. If you want it to look nice and like cohesive through the whole thing, you have to make sure you're alternating your over unders properly. Okay, so I'm just going to pull it up like this, back down to make like a little hill. I like to always give it a strum. It just kind of makes the air go through it and loosens it up. And then push it down with the comb. So everything's nice and even and it's not tight on your edges. So let's see where our pattern is here. Okay, so with this last row that I did, I am over. See how my warp or my weft is over the warp string. So the next one, if I want this one to be over, so with this row, this one's going to be an over, right? So I can start here. So I can start the color here. Oh no, wait, I have to do the bottom first. Hold on. So let's see. Under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I want to keep 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the next one needs to be an under. And that will put me in the right place now. So see how this last string is over and I want to be under right here. So at this row, I can start doing the actual picture, right? So I just want to make sure that I can start at this row, because if this one was supposed to be over according to the chart, that wouldn't work because I have an over right here and I need an under. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're gonna go, because we're gonna keep our gray and we're gonna get to right there where we want to start the bottom of our tree. And then we'll switch colors. So here I'm over. I'm gonna go under, over, under, over, over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And here's where I want to be under. Okay, so here's where I have to end with this gray. So I'm just gonna, instead of going all the way through, just gonna pull it out the back. And we're gonna leave it sitting there because we can use it to continue going up, right? Because now I want to change colors to make the bottom of the tree. So you can keep going and keep doing the border if you don't want to take your yarn off. Like I said, you don't really have to go row by row. You can just, with weaving, you can do it anywhere. So like if I wanted to keep doing the side borders, I could keep going up with the gray, but I'm gonna bring in the green so you can see how the two colors work together. So just put a knot on there. If you're using a really thicker yarn too, you can use the needle that has a larger eye, and you can buy more of those too. Okay, so let's take a long piece. And here I am. Here's where I left. This is an under. So now for the next one, I'm going to have to go over. So I'm going to come up here where I left off. I do it this way. I just come in through the back. And now you can see the green is under and the gray is under. So those are both unders. And we're going to just like attach those later. So I started with an under. Here's my under, and then I'm going to go over with the yellow, under, over, under, over, under, over. So I'll end with an over, and then I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the green. So under, that counts as 1. Over, under, over, under. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's my 8th one, and it should be an over, and it is, so we know we're on the right track. So just pull that through. What gets confusing is that like this string here, because it's an under, it's kind of like, oh, I forget, does this go with the gray block or does this go with the green block? That's why you have to sort of just count it in the beginning to make sure that your over and unders match up properly and you're doing the right amount of the blocks. Like I said, only if you want to do an image like this. If you want to just have fun with it, that's always a good outcome too. Okay, so now I'm over this one and I'm going to come back up from the back because I want to go around that string. So I have to come up through the back. And now I am under. So my first stitch, you can call it, or my first weft is under. And now I'm over, under, over, under, over. And because this is just like an easy rectangle, I'm just going to keep going along with the green, and then I'll fill in the edges. Okay. So Haley asks, so when you did the over under, is that one row of a square do you have to go right to the left, then left to right to make the complete stitch that is on the pattern? I always start from right and work to the left. So start at the right and then go left to right and then go right to left and left to right, back and forth like that. If you're starting in the middle which you can, which is how I do it, you can just come in through the back anywhere, as long as you're on the right over under, right? So if you're supposed to be over, you want to make sure you start like from the front to the back. But if you want to be under, you have to start from the back to the front. And that's only if you're working in the center of the warp. If you're just working from the edges, you would have to do the same thing, but you would still start at the edge. So if you want to start, if you start with an under, you go under. If you start with an over, you go over. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing with these little graphs. That's why I like to do like freehand stuff too, because then you don't have to worry about too much counting and graphs. You just kind of throw some yarn in there and make it look fun and pretty. Okay, so now here's my last one. Remember, before we were on an under here. So what tends to happen sometimes is because this is an under, you're like kind of forget that you're supposed to do something on that warp string. And then what I would do is like, okay, I'm done here. I'm going to go back this way and come back around. And then this warp string would be empty and it wouldn't have anything in it. And then if you tried to put the gray around it, you would be off as far as your chart goes, because this warp string is supposed to have a green. But the green is there, it's just under. And we keep it to the back because that's the back of the work. So this is a green, it's just under. So with this one, I have to take the green and go over, right? So make sure you don't miss those ones. So I'm going over. And then, yeah, this isn't over. So I'm going to go over, wrap it around, and then over again. Wait a second, let me make sure. So I'm going over this one. Yes, because this row it was an under. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And I should have 8 for the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so now I'm under this. I'm going to go under. So this row is an over, but now I'm starting a new row. So with the new row, we're going to be under. So we wrap it around that string. And the wraparound is kind of like the end of this row and the beginning of this row. So over, and now the new row, it's under. And now I'm going over this one. And here's where I ended. See, with this row, I was under. Now I'm going to be over. And I just pull it out from the back. That's why they make those stand-up looms. So you can kind of have it standing up and facing you, so you don't have to keep lifting it up like this. And just push it down a bit. And once you start pushing it down, the rows really kind of squish into each other. So it's hard to keep track sometimes. Okay, so now I'm going under. Over, under, over. Okay, now if I were to pull it really hard like that, it would move everything. So that's what we want to avoid. We don't want to pull it really hard. Even if it looks a little loose on the edges like that, that's fine. And push it down. Okay, so now I'm over here. Now I'm going to come up under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. And because I'm an over, I have to pull it out from the back. If I were on an under, I would pull it up from the front. Hold that. Okay, so as you can see, we've done several rows here, but we still have a very short tree trunk. So the graph is good, but sometimes it can be deceiving because this is really going to kind of smush down more. That's why I made them so tall. Because if you look on this, like if you look on this weave that I did, and you look on the graph that I made for it, you can see the shape is different, right? It's more of an even shape here, and it's more of a much taller here. That's because these little squares are shorter. They're wider than they are short. They're not, these are perfect squares on here, but these squares on our actual weave are short and wide. If that makes sense. So keep that in mind if you're like designing your own thing. You want to make sure you have enough rows to make it look like whatever shape you want it to look like. And now I have, looks like I have, if I were to count my rows here, it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 so far. And I have on my chart, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll do 2 more. That's 1. Oops, lost my yarn there. Let's try this bigger one. Okay, I'm over here. I'm going to come back under. And I think that was 2 more rows. So this is an under, over, so I'm just going to pull it out through the back because I'm under on this one. And squish it all down. Okay, that's actually 8 rows. And you can see how you can see the white warp strings. Those are showing through, which is fine. So the thicker the yarn that you have, the more your warp strings are going to show through. If you use really thin yarn, like if you use a yarn that's thinner than the warp yarn, they're not going to show at all. That's why if you see like really detailed weavings with like whole, sceneries on it and stuff, they use really small yarn and you don't hardly see the warp string at all. Okay. What is the purpose of, this is a good question. Suzanne says, what is the purpose of making the hill before combing down the yarn? I don't know why it works, but it works. I'm really not sure why it works, but you'll see if you ever watch people do it, they come all the way up, they make the hill, and then they beat it down. It just sort of evens everything out for some reason. It just makes the spacing work perfectly. So I know that's not a great answer, but you'll see when you start doing it, the hill makes a difference. Okay, so now what I can do here, because see, I'm finished with this part, and then I want to go along this way to make the side of the tree, but I don't want to really use the same string because then my row would be off on this side, right? Because this part of this row ended right here. And if I continue this row over there, then the next row would be like uneven. So I just stop usually and start with a new string. I always have a lot of ends to weave in, but I just like the way it looks better. So we can cut that one and leave it for when we're finished. And now I can pull this gray back in and work up the side like that. Right, so we left off here. Okay, so see how I was saying this is where the gray is under, but this is the part of the greens row. So now we're going to go this way. We're going to go back this way. These are not going to connect. These, when you have like a vertical rows like this, just because of the nature of weaving, you cannot like, you have to start going this way. You're not going to be able to make the row flow completely. So I'm going to take this gray from the back and I'm going to come back up the front. Tail out of the way. And I'm going to go back towards the right with my over under. And back again. See, I'm going to end where this one starts. And back up this way. Do you tie off the weave at the beginning of, you can tie, somebody said, do you tie off at the beginning? You can actually, you can make a knot around here, or you can make a knot around here. I just don't like, I haven't perfected that. So I just leave them hanging in the back here. I'll show you. I just leave all my stuff hanging in the back until I'm all finished. And then I go through and weave them in, but I'll show you how to do that. But I usually don't use knots, but I've seen lots of people use knots. So I think it's probably just a personal preference thing. You don't have to, but you definitely can if you want to. So let's just push that down. Over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. Back over. This is the drawback to keeping the tails back there like that. You snag them into your other parts and get twisted up. Over, under, over, under, over. Okay, so then what I would do is the same thing. I would introduce a new strand here, and I would just keep weaving up, and then I would probably do a little bit more of the center and keep weaving up. And I kind of do it as I go, like try to build it up as I go. But like I said, you don't necessarily have to. If you're just making just like a rectangle shape, I would just take the strand and keep going up and then fill in the sides. With the triangles, you have a little bit more angle. So just to keep things in place, it's good to work both colors at the same time like we are here. And you could always just drop the one and then pick it back up if you have some more space that you need to fill in. But basically we're just filling in the space with the going according to the chart, okay? So because this is a big project and we only had an hour, I do want to show you how to take it off the loom. I wish I had another one that had a little bit more filled in so you could get a better idea of it. But you're basically going to just continue on with your colors according to the chart until you get to the last row. And then you're going to put in another row of twining just like we did here under the fringe. You put in another row of twining just to hold things together. And then you will weave in your ends in the back. Let's do that. So I'm just going to take, probably here, I'll take a smaller needle. And this is very simple. You're just going to take whatever tail end that you have left on there. And you're going to put it down under these are called channels, right? So these little overs are channels. So you're going to put that needle down through the channels, maybe like 3 or 4. You could go back up if you want, but this is usually sufficient, right? So then you take this tail and you can go up these 3 channels. Or 2 or 3, whatever. Let's go up 2. And then if you really want to, which I usually do, is I just tie these 2 together. Like if they're close enough, I'll just tie them together like this, loosely, so I don't pull the front of my design at all. Make a little knot and then cut those ends off. You don't have to tie them. If you just put them through the channels, they will usually stay. That's just the way I am, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to take this top one, make sure, see how this is ended on an under. So we're just going to take it and put it through the channels, right? Make sure you're doing all of this on the back of your work. Nothing, you wouldn't do anything on the front, right? Okay, so these channels I'm going to go through here. Just like 3. See, that's not going anywhere. Even if I don't tie it, it's not going anywhere. This one ended on, right? This isn't, because we're looking at it from the back. This is an under. Now, you see how it's over right here? If I flip it, if I were to tie it into the channel, oops, I did this in the front. Shoot. If I were to, hold on a second, how did these guys get in here? I'm going to do that one again. If I were to tie this one up there, then I would have a warp string empty, right? So if you're on the back and it ended to where it's over now because we're on the back, but it ended on an under, then you want to take that one and wrap it around so you don't have any warp strings left without anything on there, right? So just wrap it around and then go up the channels there. So let's go put it under this one, this one. Grab that. That's why you want to leave decent sized tails, right? And just pull that through. And then we would do the same to this one. And then cut it all off. So you can see it's neat on the front. You don't see any of that we tied in. This needs another couple rows, but you get the idea. It's nice and neat on the front, and it's somewhat neat on the back, but you're not going to see the back of your work. This is what happens when you do shape like two different colors side by side like this. You're going to get a gap right here. So if I were to keep going this way and this way, the gap would be a little bit more noticeable. And what you could do is take one of these, some of the warp string, and sew those together like crisscross from the back. So you would start from the back and you would just sew a warp string, boom, 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 like that. If you're like uncomfortable with the gap. If you're doing it on an angle, you don't see the gaps as much. So let me show you here. See, oh, this is the back. This is the back, but you can see I did a few knots, but it's pretty tidy enough. This is the front. So here's like a little gap in between the warp strings because I ended this one and I started this one, and you have to kind of wrap it around because it's not going to flow completely across if you're using different colors. So see, you can see some gaps, but when it's hanging, it's, you know, it's not really noticeable. So the gaps don't bother me. Some people don't like the gaps, and you can sew it in. Okay. So once I have all my ends weaved in, let's say I have all my ends weaved in here. What I would do next is take this off. This is the front. Take this off, starting from the bottom of your work, wherever side it is. And we would just cut these bottom strings here. Just cut them right off. This is why you need to leave space, because when we cut these off, we're going to have to tie them off, right? So cut this one and then just tie these two ends together into a knot. This one. And see what, this is what I was saying. Because it's like stretched on this warp nicely, it makes a really nice shape. But once you take it off the warp, the shape really changes. And this is only changing a lot because there's hardly anything on it. So it's really like drooping, as you can see, but yours is going to be completely filled up. So it's not going to change its shape that much. It's going to loosen a bit, but it's not going to be like this one. This is only because I have like nothing filled in here. So you're just going to tie each one of these down at the bottom so it doesn't come apart. And these will all be covered up by the fringe too. But if you're doing something where you don't have a fringe, then you could just, you would have to just sew these ends in, like weave them in somewhere so they're covered up. Or make something with the design where they're covered up. Okay, see? So then you do that all the way across. And for the top, you don't have to cut it if you're putting it on a stick. You would just undo the tops like this, keep the loops, right? And then you would take your stick. So you could just get like one at Michael's, or you could just get like a stick from outside. And then I just put it right on the stick. But first I tie a knot, right? So I do like a twist and another knot. Just that keeps it in better shape. So like a knot and then a loop, right? And then you would just loop that right onto your stick. It's really hard to tell because, like I said, we don't have anything on this weave, but let me show you on the big one. Okay, so here's where I tied those little bottoms. Just tied them in a knot. I left them there because you can't really see them. I think I did on this one, it looks like I did a row of twining in the acrylic yarn and then another row of twining in the cotton yarn. You can do that if you want. And then on the top, I did my last row of twining. You can see that right there. And then I just took it off the loom, tied it in a knot down there, and then looped it right onto the stick. And then I just made another little loop as a hanger. And that is all you have to do to finish it off. Okay, so let me get to some questions. I'm wondering, what are the dimensions of the small and the large tree? So the large one at how I did it, I'll tell you the dimensions right now. And then you can, all this is going to change, of course, like depending on your yarn, right? Just like knit and crochet. If you're using a much thicker yarn, it's going to be bigger. If you're using a thinner yarn, it's going to be smaller. If you want to use a really thick yarn, you can just do your weft like every other. Like instead of warping it one and then the next one, you can warp it every other one. Or if you want it even thinner, you can do two. So one and then two and the next one, like that. So this particular one with the yarn that I used is, so like from the top to the, so like from where the actual weaving part ends to where the fringe begins is about 11. So like your weaving area is 11 inches. So however many rows I have on there, that ends up being 11 inches. And then the width is 11 inches too. And that's just the weaving area. That doesn't count the fringe or this top part. So this ended up being about 11 by 11. So for this small one, how many rows does it have? It might be, if I had to guess, like 6 or 7 inches by half of this, like maybe 5. Probably end up being like, it might end up being like 6 by 6 or 7 by 7. That'd be my guess, just based on how many stitches are on this graph and how many stitches are on this graph. So it might end up being slightly larger than half the size. Green class, thank you. If I'm not sure. Okay, so hopefully everyone has the chart. Like I said, what I showed you, even though I wasn't able to show you row by row, is the basics. So just kind of, and if you change your yarn in a different way, or if you like just kind of do different things, it's not with weaving, it's okay. It can take a lot more like errors and mistakes than something that you would like say knit or crochet, because you can kind of go back over, or you can fill in things. You know, it doesn't have to be exactly the way I showed you. The cool thing about it is you don't have to do it row by row exactly. You can do a few rows here, a few rows here, build up the center, switch colors, don't switch colors, like, you know, you can kind of change it up. But all the techniques that we used are what you're going to need for this. So you can do the whole thing on your own with the chart and with the class. I'd say probably the most important thing to remember is don't pull it too tight. So you see how my edges are nice and straight. That's because I did that up, and then I did the strum, and then I beat it down before, you know, I just didn't pull it tight and then beat it down. So do that little hill, do the little with your finger, do the strum, and then beat it down. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's quick and it's easy. Okay, so looking forward. Okay, looks like everybody had fun. So I am glad everybody had fun. And are there any questions before I go? Because I don't want to sign off if anyone has a burning question. But everyone's saying thank you, and they had a lot of fun. So I want to say thank you to you guys because I had a lot of fun too, and it was great to have this nice big class. And I hope everyone learned something new. And I hope to see you another time for another class. I'm here usually once a month. I love the fabric, and it looks like everybody is just talking about how much fun they had, and we don't have any more questions. So that's great. I'm glad I explained everything, and I'm glad everybody had fun. And remember, you can watch the replay if you need to, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.